But yeah, without further ado, I guess we can jump right in to Kyle's latest interview. He's about to fist pump in like, rah!
Behind the scenes, who was actually furious about the fact that they had tweeted the Rogan endorsement and were like promoting the Rogan
AOC was furious about this?
AOC was mad because there's a certain subset of leftists who think,
Joe Rogan is a right winger.
He's untouchable because, he made some trans joke in 1998 or whatever the fuck, Yeah. And so, yeah, that stuff is really annoying to me. It really frustrates me.
I had no idea about that.
I don't know how much longer you can stick around. I want to ask you, have you heard of selectorate theory or read the Dictator's Handbook?
I have not, no.
Have you watched CGP Gray's video Rules for Rulers?
I have not, no.
Yeah. That's the one. This is like the really big idea. And I totally recommend it if you're a political commentator, because it really, it's like the theory of everything for politics, for building coalitions and stuff. Like there was a big hubbub. I think Force the Vote came up. Were you involved in the Force the Vote thing when they were trying to get, what was that?
So it was mostly Jimmy Dore came up with it. Jimmy Dore was like the chief advocate of it.
Right.
I came out in support of it because I didn't see him getting much backup, and I think the idea made sense.
Okay.
And so I was just, I was a secondary voice or an ancillary voice, and I was just providing some of the arguments as to why I think this makes sense and why this is the direction we should go in.
Right.
I literally totally forgot what the vote was even being forced about.
I thought it was healthcare.
It was Medicare for all. So it was, in the midst of the pandemic. And, when you have a pandemic, like a once in a generation pandemic, it's like, you think maybe we should center healthcare and provide like aggressive arguments as to why we should have universal healthcare at a time like right now. And you just saw total apathy among the progressive caucus, among people who were supposed to be allies and advocates of Medicare for all. And that was really, that was a moment that was really a shame because it led to a lot of nihilism on the left about what's even possible. Because you didn't move the needle at all when you're going 100 miles an hour trying to advocate for this thing and begging your representatives like, hey, could you please fucking represent us here? And there was a public citizen report that came out, I don't know, maybe a year into the pandemic or something like that, where they crunched the numbers and found that about 330,000 deaths could have been avoided if we had a universal healthcare system in this country. Because we don't have universal healthcare and because and so many people are uninsured that by the time they show up to the hospital, it's already too late and then they end up dying. Whereas if we had a universal healthcare system, a lot of those people would have survived because they probably would have been able to seek care earlier. No. So it was just a total failure of progressives and it turned a lot of lefties nihilistic. And that's a nihilism that to this day, I kind of have to argue with because, if you think nothing's possible and you don't do anything to try to change anything, then yeah, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy and nothing's going to be possible.
I think my issue with Force the Vote was that, Biden ran specifically not on Medicare for all. He ran on a public option.
True.
So he's sort of running against, Bernie Sanders and Medicare for all. So it'd be
which, just to pause it, is exactly the reason why we have to pressure him to do Medicare for all. I do find that to be some interesting logic. It's like, yeah, Biden doesn't support Medicare for all. That was the point. We got to get him to. We got to get the Democratic Party on the right page as far as healthcare, because they keep, promising to expand healthcare coverage over and over again and then falling short every time. I mean, ever since Obama, that's basically been their script. And the thing about Force the Vote, which Kyle references, is that it would actually be kind of, pressuring the progressives in Congress that largely this kind of space, helped elect. It would be pressuring them to make a stand and actually point that out and kind of hold up Nancy Pelosi's speakership as a hostage in order to get at least a vote. Right. So that was the point of Force the Vote. And obviously it was a good idea. Whatever you think of Jimmy Dore, it was 100% a good idea. It's one of the things that Zach and I really built this channel advocating for, honestly.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, look, the fact of the matter remains is like, Joe Biden got elected by saying, oh, we got to push him to the left. So all these other people that were like, oh, don't stay home if you don't believe in literally anything that Joe Biden supports, we're going to push him to the left. Right. That was the main. I mean, that and COVID were the only reasons he was able to get his crusty ass across the finish line. Right. So this idea that we're just supposed to acquiesce and bend the knee to whatever this fucking dude wants that is just antithetical to leftist politics 100%. But I'm sure we're going to hear Kyle give a full-throated defense of this. Don't worry, guys.
of like a weird slap in the face to Biden and the people that elected him, I guess, over Bernie. And so it would have made more sense to me if they're going to try to push for a public option, which they still haven't done, and I think has been a huge failing of the Biden administration, then I'd be in favor of that. But pushing for Medicare for all doesn't really make sense to me at all.
So there's an old saying, if you shoot for the stars, you might reach the moon. And like, so you're supposed to
want the big ask. And then
go
back
into the negotiation repping the strongest position, and then throughout the legislative process, it's probably going to be watered down in 1,000 different ways, and then you might end up on public option. So, and like, honestly, I don't really care what Biden wants. Like, I think this is the answer. So you try to. That's the whole idea. Just try to force them to do the right thing. We know they're not going to do it.
And yeah, I totally agree with this answer and this style of politics, this kind of strategizing. Obviously, LBJ didn't run on the Civil Rights Act. It's not like he was promising people that he was going to do civil rights when he got elected. He was forced to do that by an active, aggressive movement on the ground, a protest movement, a boycott movement, etc., that really forced his hand. So, in the same way, yeah, of course, Joe Biden didn't run on Medicare for all. He didn't run on that as his platform, but that doesn't change the fact that it's the right thing to do. And in many ways, just like the civil rights movement, the movement for healthcare is a human rights struggle. And of course, the powers that be, the capitalist oligarchs that control us, of course, they're not just going to kindly permit us these rights. We have to demand them. And that was at least part of the point of force the vote. That's why it was called force the vote. It was about forcing this to happen.
Yeah, and just you can make that point about anything. Like these guys are enlightened centrists, so I would imagine that they're at least like somewhat on the Black Lives Matter momentum, defund the police momentum. Like, we had a massive outpouring of support for that. Joe Biden doesn't want it. Are we just supposed to go the fuck home and say, sorry guys, you elected Joe Biden and he wants to massively fund and militarize the police? Shut the fuck up. You're slapping Joe Biden in the face. Like, good, fucking good. He deserves to be slapped in the face. Jesus Christ.
On their own. So it's like, well, let's try to force them to do it and just see what ends up happening. But there were no real allies in Congress on that.
It's not, to me, it's politics is the art of the possible. And, they were never going to support Medicare for all anyway. And I understand what you're saying about like the big ask, which is, there's definitely a lot of validity to that. But on the other hand, it is a problem because since we have this sort of like polarized left-right media cycle, if the opening bid is Medicare for all, even if that gets watered down to a public option, the right-wing media is going to run it as Medicare for all, socialized medicine, regardless, once that opening bid occurs. So I don't know if that would make sense.
No fucking shit, dummy. That's why we're asking for the whole pie. Hello, way to make my fucking, and Kyle, I hope he comes in after this and shores it up. But way to make the point we were just making. Way to walk into that trap beautifully. No fucking shit. You just explained the entire reason to not go for a public option. Do you remember what happened? Do you have I don't know how old this guy is. He's probably our age or older. So I'm hoping that he remembers the Obama years, right? Yeah, there's always going to be the obstacles, right? So it's like, oh, well, you're going to have the faint talk of a fucking public option, which there literally was over a decade ago. We were still talking about a public option. And then what did they do? They did that old pump fake where we got Romney care instead, except they called it Obamacare. Again, giving us still vilifying it as if it had been the public option, when instead they got what they fucking wanted, which was a Republican think tank bill that was a massive handout to health insurers and made sure that every single motherfucker on earth had to be paying into the health insurance scheme. Yeah, okay. That's what happened last time. Let's run that exact same strategy again. Go fuck yourself. Of course we're not going to do that. We're going to do exactly what we... Because if they're going to vilify it as if it is whatever it is, should we ask for nothing, or should we ask for what the fuck we want and then fight for it? And I would also add to this guy that even on Fox News, they had to put up that Medicare for all was above water with their own viewership. So don't give me this bullshit like people don't want their healthcare costs to go down.
Like a strategy level.
So the attempt of force the vote, it wasn't even supposed to be like a partisan thing of like, hey, other lefties, let's get on board and do this. It was supposed to be a rallying cry to people of all different political stripes and affiliations. There's a pandemic. We don't have universal health care. People are dying. For the love of God, for once, do the thing that's right for the country. And so now ultimately it may have ended up being more of just like a niche lefty thing, but that certainly wasn't the original intent. And like, there were historical analogs to this that I thought were really interesting that I learned about at the time, which is another reason why I supported it. Like women's suffrage, for example, came up like 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 times where they had a vote on it and it lost before they ended up eventually getting it. And so the idea was like, even if we lose, which you almost expect to lose, given all the odds that are against you and how bought off the politicians are by the insurance companies, etc. Even if you lose, you might spark something that then leads to the next fight and then the next fight. So I thought there were really solid arguments to do it. I thought
I'm a little let down by Kyle's full-throated defense of this, which is why I keep jumping in to give an even bigger fucking defense of what's going on. I'll just go ahead and fortify this a little bit more. These guys say they're enlightened centrists. Again, I don't know a ton about them, but I'm going to go ahead and say that they were on the, they were with the 70% of the country being opposed to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. The fucking Senate just did a fucking exact same thing where they basically did a floor vote so that they could explicitly point to the people that did not vote for this. Right, and say, oh, sorry, we couldn't get it passed because we didn't have enough votes, but we still have it on record, yada, yada, yada. They do this shit all the time. They just don't want to do it for something like Medicare for all, which is why we had to force them to. This is why it's in their name. It's not that hard to understand. Force the vote. Yes, they didn't want to. No, they didn't want Medicare for all. Yes, they're oligarchs. Yes, we were going to try and force them to do it anyway. That's called applying pressure and, wielding leverage.
All the arguments against it were just, defeatism and nihilism and, why even bother to try since it's really hard. But it's like, yeah, I'm sure if you spoke to somebody who lived in Mississippi in 1955 and said, hey, you think segregation is going to be here forever? They'd be like, of course it's going to fucking be here forever. We have segregation. We've always had segregation.
Right.
So it was trying to like change the scope of what people view as possible. And it just ultimately ended up failing for a number of reasons. There was no support inside Congress, but then also, I mean, keep it real, Jimmy rubs a lot of people the wrong way. He's very quick to like, if you don't agree with him 100% right away, he just sort of in the next breath will just be like, you're a sellout and you're hopeless and fuck you.
We've gone
it's like, well, that's definitely not how you build bridges. It's
Totally.
definitely not how you.
And yeah, I do have to agree with Kyle there for the most part. I think Jimmy does have a really vindictive streak. And obviously, Zach and I don't pearl clutch and tone police people. I like Jimmy Dore's aggressive style. But I do think, Kyle is touching on something that's accurate there. And I think what rubs a lot of people the wrong way about Jimmy is that he treats his leftist allies that way. A lot of times the people he really lashes out at and really displays that vicious and vindictive tendency towards are people on the left. And it doesn't seem like he usually displays that kind of aggression and that energy towards really anyone on the right as far as commentators. Tucker Carlson, for example, will never get called out by Jimmy Dore for sheep herding people into the Republican Party, but Jimmy will constantly call out Kyle and Crystal for sheep herding people into the Democratic Party. So there's an example of that. And yeah, I think Kyle's on point.
Or Ryan Grimm. Oh, he's a fucking stooge for the establishment because he works for The Intercept, which is funded by Piero Midyar, but yet Tucker's allowed to work for Fox News and collect all of those checks, and he's a real fucking voice for the people, untainted populace. Like, come on, bro. Like, it's so dishonest. That's what frustrates people, right? Like, no, like I don't care that you go on Tucker Carlson if that's your prerogative, but it's just kind of like the difference in the like bifurcation in how people are treated by Jimmy based off of whether or not he disagrees with you and you're a leftist or whether or not he disagrees with you and you're a right wing is, I think, that what a big part of what rubs people like me and Gavin the wrong way.
Yeah, you don't build coalitions that way. Jimmy's lost his mind on fucking Ukraine, and it drives me insane.
Yeah, there's no nuance in that commentary at all when it comes to Ukraine. Yeah, what I can't understand why he doesn't get it, and why some percentage of the left just doesn't understand this is like, okay, that same perception, Jimmy, that you have about America. Right. In this instance, Russia is America.
Yeah.
Like they're doing the shit that like we did in Iraq, like they're doing it in Ukraine.
Right. Good. Yeah. Perfect example. Yeah.
Right. But there's, for whatever reason, it's like they can't wrap their minds around it. Is it really that hard to believe that big, powerful states do fucked up things?
Yeah.
Like it's not unique to America. Like, what are we, uniquely fucking evil? Are we uniquely evil in Americans is how we act and how we think? No. Every empire throughout history does fucked up things. Every big powerful state throughout history does fucked up things. This is an example of a big powerful state doing a fucked up thing, and it's obvious, and he can't get his fucking mind around it.
Jimmy's like,
so my response to that would be is that I don't have any problem with people that are explaining the context of what's happening in Russia and Ukraine and why the NATO expansion, for example, kind of resulted in this end goal, which is really unfortunate. But I do, in a sense, agree with Kyle that there are some nominal leftists out here that their commentary on this whole situation like almost comes off as borderline just propaganda for Russia. Like they're just, giving the Russian state media line, the Russian, perspective at the expense of anything else and not really, fully condemning the war crimes that are being committed. So I think it's totally fine to give the context and explain the fact that NATO expansion and U.S. hegemony had a big part of the reason, why this is happening, and our continued aggression and escalation is definitely not helping, with the expansion of the NATO borders even further, and with the U.S. funneling billions of dollars of arms into this region, essentially as a proxy war. I totally get all that, and that's what Zach and I have done here on the Vanguard. But I do think that some channels' commentary borders on propagandistic for the Russian state. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it sounds like Kyle kind of, when he maybe has pivoted like slightly more towards the I don't want to say U.S. involvement in Ukraine, but he's certainly not as skeptical as he was about it maybe a few months ago before he kind of got embarrassed in that debate with Vosh a little bit. Even though I think Kyle was right in that debate, it's just tough to debate a guy like Vosh because he spends all day, every day thinking about the fucking specific military positioning of everybody in Ukraine or whatever the fuck he thinks about. And so I just think that, I would push back a little bit on Kyle's framing here as saying like, oh, this is just as bad as what the United States did in Iraq. Like, I would still say that's not that lets us off the hook a lot for the damage that we did to that entire region. And that's not me simping for fucking Russia, right? Like, and obviously, and you have to talk about how we continue to throw gasoline on the fire, by not coming out in opposition to things like Sweden and Finland trying to join NATO, which again, they're bordering the Russia. So that would also create an increased tension, all these types of deals. So obviously this is a complicated geopolitical issue. But yeah, in the same way that I think it's fucked up when streamers like Vosh are like, yeah, we need to send all of the fucking weaponry we can and kill as many Russians as we can. I'm like, that's fucking dumb. It's also dumb as rocks when you see people parroting things like, oh, this is exactly what Putin is doing to liberate the people of Ukraine, and all this stuff. Like, oh, is the Azov battalion full of Nazis? 100%. Does the United States fucking imperial media system want to cover that up? 100%. They do. But that doesn't alone mean that like Vladimir Putin is going to Ukraine and doing this for virtuous fucking like denazification reasons. That's the propaganda that the Kremlin feeds the people in Russia, right? So as a fucking commentator, as somebody who sifts through all of this, you have to say, okay, let's try and look at this rationally from a bird's eye view. Let's not accept U.S. state propaganda. Let's not accept Russian state propaganda. Let's go to the history books and see how we got here. And then let's look objectively at what we can definitively prove, right? And it just seems like there's a lot of people who don't want to do that because it's just way easier to get into the team on this one, right? It's like you're either team Russia for some reason because you hate America, for a lot of times very justifiable reasons, or your team Ukraine because
Team America World Police.
Yeah, Team America World Police, exactly. And even a guy like Vosh will 100% simp for U.S. hegemony. So it is what it is. So I just think that we need to be talking more in the lane in between those voices. But
a contingent of people on the left whose the primary lens is America bad.
Yeah.
And so it's just sort of like a reaction to like, oh, if America or the mainstream's in favor of supporting Ukraine, then that obviously I'm going to just be reactionary to that and say, well, they're hiding something or they're wrong.
In the past, I would have hard disagreed with you. Yeah. Today, I completely agree with you.
That's because today you watch a lot more Vosh.
I was about to make the same.
Yeah,
it was a super eye-opening experience for me when I saw this.
We were blindsided by it because a lot of people in our audience, a lot of people on the right did the exact same thing. They did.
I saw your debate with Sargon.
Yeah.
I saw your debate with Sargon. I was like, what the fuck is even going on? What is even going on? You kept saying, well, from the Russian perspective, but let's just talk about objectively. What the fucking Russian perspective? Let's just talk about objectivity.
That's hilarious. So that makes sense. You're still friends with Sargon, right? I mean, you still talk to him.
No, I haven't talked to him in years.
Really?
Years and years. Yeah, we maybe did 3 or maybe 4 streams together going back to like 2016-ish.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't talked to him in years. I think we drifted apart when I was one of the co-founders of Justice Democrats, and I was like sincerely trying to change the Democratic Party from within, make it more populist left, economically left, and like not corrupt. And he was very skeptical of it from the beginning. And so from then on, we kind of just naturally parted ways. I never took any shots at him, and he never took any shots at me.
Yeah, Sargon's. Carl. I guess he's going by Carl now. Carl Benjamin. You know, he's always helped us on the show. He's always been a friend to me. I've always seen him to be a stand-up guy. I've never seen him do any of the things he's like been accused of, except for, you know, the rape joke on Twitter, which is, I mean, that's a solid joke as far as I
might have to take back my comment about these guys being totally good faith, because Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin is a pretty insidious, just a complete reactionary, right-wing, racist commentator, in my opinion. There's almost no other way to slice it. He's a culture warrior. He, repeats ridiculous talking points against the left constantly. He has, routinely tried to tear down Black Lives Matter, and defends the police. So I have no love for Carl Benjamin.
Yeah, I only know he went on Joe Rogan back in the day, right? There's a Joe Rogan with Sargon of Akkad. I probably listened to 20 minutes of that like 8 years ago when I was a pizza delivery driver. But fuck if I've heard anything from that guy ever since. Was he what was it? I think I was mixing him up for never mind. That would have been a different Count Dankula is a different account. Never mind.
Basically the same person though. Huge Le Pen supporter, huge Trump supporter. Yeah,
Le Pen supporter.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Trump supporter, and you want to call
yeah.
this guy? Oh, go.
Yeah.
Le Pen is a fascist.
Oh, 100%.
I'm concerned. So.
This is how much of a boomer I am. I don't even know the joke you're talking about. I just know he's been banned from Twitter maybe like 1,000 times, but I didn't know why.
He said, I wouldn't even rape you joke about some parliament MP. I mean, it's something that got him a lot of it. This is the thing. And I wonder often if people do this incendiary stuff so they get attention and they blow up, and then they spend their entire career apologizing for the incendiary thing that they did.
Sargon and Cenk Uygur have a lot in common as we...
Oh, no, don't say that.
Wait. No. You'll agree with me once I finish the thought.
Okay.
We are creators. We are YouTubers who try to make it in official politics.
Right.
And didn't end well for Sargon and didn't end well for Cenk Uygur.
Right.
Yeah. Are you?
And by the way, what he's referencing there is the fact that both Cenk Uygur and Carl Benjamin ran for political office. Obviously, Carl Benjamin in the UK and Cenk Uygur in the state of California. I think it was like Orange County where he ran for Congress. But both of them miserably failed, like hilariously, pathetically failed. And actually, I remember one of the pretty funny things about Carl Benjamin's run for office was that he kept getting milkshaked. He kept getting, milkshakes thrown at him from like protesters and stuff, which obviously a lot of people tried to pearl clutch about and be like, this is, fascism and violence and stuff. And technically, yes, it is assault, but it was still funny, undeniably.
Yeah, it was kind of like when there was an event at the college Gavin and I went to where this like anti-trans person got like sprayed with a bunch of shit and they like tried to expel them and arrest them and call them like fucking, whatever, all kinds of dirty names. It was mostly funny though. It was like fucking scented oils and soap or some shit like that. Anyway, and just to reminisce really quickly about Cenk Uygur himself, the man who lost to a woman who he couldn't get through the Democratic primary. It won with all of his name recognition, and it was an abysmal failure. Wasn't even fucking close. He lost to a woman named Christy Smith, about as generic of a sounding name and even more milquetoast politics, right? Who then got get ready for this, guys. The person who destroyed Cenk Uygur got absolutely clobbered in the general election in California. Imagine losing to somebody who loses to a Democrat in California.
It was Orange County, but yeah.
I knew you were going to say that. I was like, Gavin, let me have this joke.
No, it still should have been an easy Democrat victory given the election that year. But anyway, thank you so much, Guy from Kings Highway, for the 199. Vanguard over Kyle Kulinski. Thanks so much for the comment. Really appreciate the 199. Always love to hear some good positive affirmation.
Yeah, Kyle ran so we could crawl.
Anyway, let's keep listening to this. I did think that was funny though, comparing Cenk to Jank to Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, someone that I really barely hear about these days. He's really a relic from the anti-SJW era. I checked his channel recently, and he hasn't really uploaded much in a while. It seems like he's kind of given up. So yeah, I just remember him being milkshaked over and over again. That was fucking funny.
Political realm. I think you're in with Sauger and Crystal Ball now. They're definitely like on mainstream or teetering on the mainstream.
No, they're definitely not mainstream. So Crystal and I are together. And
together. I mean, I don't see her. Is she sitting behind you? What?
No, she's my girlfriend.
Really?
Nice. Yeah.
Have you announced this on your show? Are we making
news?
Yeah,
this is known. This is known.
Damn you! Why didn't you save it for us?
And yeah, there's I do a different show with her called Crystal Kyle and Friends, which is more of a podcast. It's not really YouTube. It's just a podcast that we do together. And yeah, in terms of our politics, what they're trying to do is like an honest populist left, populist right show.
Right.
Like that's their framework. That's their mindset. And they've taken off massively in popularity since they went independent. They used to be with The Hill. They used to have a show called Rising on the Hill, which is a corporation, a fucking soulless corporation that took advantage of them.
Right.
Then they left The Hill, started their own thing called Breaking Points. They've been wildly successful. And yeah, like, look, I'm on the left, right? I would call myself a social democrat or like a libertarian leftist. But their version of politics is much more in alignment with me than like I used to be with TYT, for example. I think TYT is too.
I would push back massively if Kyle called himself a libertarian leftist in front of me after he just said that he supported fucking sending ammunition to Ukraine. I just wanted to pause that and break in and say that's not quite an accurate description of your politics, pal. But I understand what he means. This is so socially libertarian, I get it. But anyway, that was all I was going to add. Good.
That's the real important takeaway from this interview. Anyway, thanks so much for the $5 though, regardless. But yeah, let's keep watching because he's about to call out TYT a little bit more. Let's go back.
Libertarian leftist. But their version of politics is much more in alignment with me than like I used to be with TYT, for example. I think TYT is too partisan. Too woke. I think they're good people there. Like I know them from behind the scenes and they're very sweet, very nice. I would never say a negative thing about them and how they were interpersonally. But yeah, my politics is a lot more like Breaking Points politics than it is like TYT politics. And so that's why.
So yeah, Kyle basically called out TYT for being too partisan and, as he said, too woke. What I will agree with on Kyle is that TYT's takes are, for the most part, pretty predictable, as Kyle's are as well, to be honest. But yeah, they do kind of play into that like David Pakman style content where it's a lot of like headlines and clickbait about Trump and. They really leaned into the whole Robert Mueller, tick, 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 tick. The walls are closing in. Again, that kind of like typical partisan coverage. Obviously, they're not, hyper partisan on everything. And they do call out the corporate Democrats. But I definitely understand what Kyle is getting at. And personally, I prefer watching Breaking Points as well. Because even if sometimes I'll agree, for example, with TYT more than Breaking Points on specific issues, overall, I just find it a lot more entertaining and engaging to watch Breaking Points because I think that TYT is just such an echo chamber. In fact, speaking of Jimmy Dore, one of the big reasons I used to be a fan of TYT back in the day, back in like 2015 to 2017, was because Jimmy Dore was regularly part of the panel and him and Jank and Anna pushed back on each other. They would, get in little debates. There would be more pushback and less echo chamber. And that's something that has really just completely, evaporated from the show. Obviously, Jimmy Dore left, but they never really replaced him with anyone that could engage with Jank or Anna in that way and create an interesting dialogue with pushback that didn't just result in this echo chamber of kind of just like progressive ideology. So I definitely understand what Kyle's getting at. And again, even though I probably agree with Jank and Anna more than I do Sagar and Jetty, I still prefer watching someone like Crystal Ball talk with Sagar and Jetty because again, they do have to bounce off each other and there are different perspectives introduced, even though sometimes I really disagree with those perspectives or ideas.
Yeah, the only thing I would really add to that is I do think it's interesting how in this conversation he does almost kind of adopt the, I agree more with Crystal and Sagar when right-wing populism and left-wing populism are still like leaps and bounds from each other. So I do think that it's interesting that, you know, he would, you know, like claim right-wing populism, but it's like the wokeism that he's like got a problem with TYT. Like there are plenty of like fucking critiques of TYT that I would, you know, make, and I do make all the time, but it's not the fact that they were, you know, up in arms about the Don't Say Gay bill. It's not the fact that they were.
To be fair to Kyle, I don't think he's actually referring to that when he talks about wokeism. I specifically remember them leaning into the hardcore the hardcore SJW talking points back in the day, and Kyle seems to always perpetually be stuck in like 2016. So I think that's what he's referencing. For just a specific example, I remember a really cringy video from TYT. This is going back so far, but I remember a really cringy video from TYT where they did a whole segment about how the Harambe memes were racist, because they cherry picked like 2 or 3 Harambe memes where they compared, like, you know, obviously African-American people to primates or whatever. And again, cherry picking what was largely a very harmless trend in the meme world. Again, most of those memes were just funny and totally, you know, good natured, but they did videos like that where they'd really like clutch their pearls and get all outraged over, you know, stuff like that. And that's definitely what Kyle's referring to, because I even remember at the time him being like, yeah, you know, TYT does put out some cringe guys, like I don't agree with them on all this stuff. So I think he's referring to that more so than he is like their pushback on the CRT or Don't Say Gay.
Gotcha. Okay, that would make a lot of sense, because you're 100% correct when you say that Kyle's perpetually stuck like 6 years ago in the political discourse. Like